Welcome to It Matters, where we cut through the noise and dive deep into the issues that really shape our world. This isn't just another political podcast. This is where we call out the lies, expose the corruption, and challenge the status quo. Whether it's dissecting the latest political circus or spotlighting the real heroes fighting for justice, we're here to give you the unfiltered truth. So buckle up. It's time to get real, get informed, and get ready to be honest. This is It Matters. With us today, we've got State Senator Mallory McMorrow from Michigan. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So the first thing my wife said was, when you pronounce her name, don't use that like East Coast accent and be like McMorrow. So like I went over it like 5 times. Let's make sure you get it right.
It was good. I always tell people it rhymes with tomorrow. You would be surprised how many people, I've been in this job now for 6 years. My first name is wrong. My last name is wrong. It's, I think it's not that hard, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's why generic names like Michael always work.
Perfect.
So the last month, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind. What's it been like for you watching Democrats go from the Biden campaign to now the Harris campaign, especially in a state like Michigan?
Yeah, it has been wild. I think Michigan voters, we know that the future of the country goes through this state. So there's a lot of weight that I think people carry on their shoulders. We know how important we are as a state. And a few weeks ago, I live in the suburbs just north of Detroit. My first district, I flipped a Republican district. So it's, a pretty moderate area that has shifted Democratic. But I can tell you the vibe here before the change was people were worried. They were genuinely scared that in a rematch between President Biden and Donald Trump that we would lose Michigan. And I had people stop me and tell me this out of deep respect for the president, but just really worried that everything we worked so hard for in Michigan would be erased. So the change has been nothing short of incredible. It has been wild to see Donald Trump continue to try to tell people that the 15,000 people that were at the rally in Detroit are AI. I'm not really sure how I'm going to tell my daughter that I'm an AI figment of her imagination, but we'll figure that out. But it's crazy. I attended an event that the Harris campaign hosted 8 minutes from my house. And it was young organizers who came to Michigan for a training to get them into the pipeline to work on the campaign in the Midwest. And there were 70 young people, like 18 to mid-late 20s, from 22 states. I love that
that's young people now, by the way.
I know. Well, they invited me there like as a young voice of the Democratic Party. And I was like, ma'am, I'm almost 40. And like sometimes it hurts from just sleeping, but okay. But it was awesome. I mean, people came from Texas and New York and California and Minnesota, and they were just in a union hall in Michigan and like spent their own money to get here. And it was wild. Like it feels good and people are happy and joyful and excited. And I don't know about you, but this is something I think we all deserve after the last few years.
We haven't. We needed it. And you can feel the palpability of like the hope and the joy. And for people who weren't around for the 2008 election, it does very much feel like the Obama-esque coming out of the dark Iraq war period. Like, what do you think it is about whether it's the vice president or just the situation that kind of flipped the switch so quickly?
I think that a lot really is about vibes. People ask, like, is it a specific issue? What happens? But I think that, like, you think back on the last few years since 2016 on, and it feels like we have just been caught in such a dark place, from the first election of Donald Trump, who I just remember, when he announced that he was running for president, slowly descending down an escalator, and everybody said, there's no way, and then we got to election day in Michigan and we kind of had this like, oh crap moment. This is real. And we have now survived a pandemic in Michigan. We had a trial run insurrection in April of 2020, long before the actual, the main insurrection on January 6th in 2021. And I think for so many people then to see Donald Trump and President Biden again, and having Trump out there again, still, it's been 4 years, still out there promoting lies about the 2020 election and, claims of stolen votes in Detroit, which we were at the epicenter of. I think people were just tired of living in, it felt like Groundhog Day, like this constant cycle of horror. And the fact that the president, I think this will go down in history as just one of the most patriotic decisions a president could ever make, to let go of personal ambition for the good of the country. And I think people have rallied around that spirit, that yes, finally somebody is putting the country first, which is such a stark contrast to Donald Trump, who only cares about Donald Trump. And it feels good. And that is a very rallying message, that it is about all of us. We do this together. And it finally feels like a chance to move on and get out of this nightmare that we've all been living in for years.
Imagine actually putting America first. It's
I know. What a concept. I feel like I've heard that phrase before. Huh.
Yeah, you've kind of been at ground zero for this Democratic rebirth in Michigan. What do you attribute that to? Because, you got Big Gretch there, you've got all these kind of rising stars. And I've been saying Michigan is the bellwether. If how Michigan goes, I think, is how the election will go.
That is 100% true. I count myself very, very lucky to have come up in politics. I ran for office for the first time in 2018. This was not what I did as a career beforehand. So to be running alongside Gretchen Whitmer and Dana Nessel and Jocelyn Benson, and it's been funny, I've talked to national reporters over the last few weeks who have said, do you think Michigan's ready to elect a woman? And I'm like, look at Michigan. We're a state run by women. If anything, we're the state leading the charge on electing women. Michigan is a place where we are a bellwether. We're a Midwest state. We are not, the hardcore lefty blue California or New York. We're a state of very pragmatic, practical, Midwest nice, but people who don't put up with any bullshit. And that has been the riding message. Gretchen Whitmer is somebody who has a very heavy mid-Michigan accent and is as comfortable in a dive bar in East Lansing as she is in any kind of fancy fundraiser. And authenticity matters. People can feel that and sense it. And we've seen the Michigan Republican Party, probably more than any other state party, really just double and triple down on Trump. And people have rejected that. So in 2022, in the last cycle that the governor was up and I was up and, the legislature, all of the legislature was up, all of the Republican candidates were running on nothing but culture wars. It was trans rights issues and LGBTQ issues and targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will never forget, on the west side of the state, which is not a Democratic stronghold.
I was going to say, where is it?
Over here. Tudor Dixon, she was the GOP nominee for governor. She hosted a rally with Riley Gaines, who, has become a right-wing commentator after tying for 5th place, was her greatest accomplishment in swimming. But they hosted this entire rally around, quote unquote, protecting girls in sports. There were bills at the time to ban kids from playing on the sports team that matches their gender identity, despite the fact that our athletic association has had a policy in place for 10 years that has worked. So they said unnecessary. So they hosted this rally, and a reporter asked Tudor, can you name, a single instance in the state of Michigan where a girl has been denied a place on a sports team because of a trans student? And she said, well, no, but it might. And then they cut to a woman who was attending the rally who said, I don't care about this. You need to talk about housing. The rent is too high. I can't buy a house. So the more that the party just ignores everyday real issues and goes down these culture war rabbit holes, they're going to keep losing. And I think Michigan, we took a Democratic trifecta in 2022 in the Midwest, in a battleground state. And I think we are writing the blueprint for how to do that. And I think that the Harris campaign is running with a very similar blueprint right now that feels really good.
Are Republicans just on a loop where they're kind of giving themselves bad advice? And in that, I mean, using Governor Walz as an example. So the big critique about him has been he's this far left person because he gives kids access to breakfast and lunch, and he makes sure that people have access to affordable education and access to reproductive health. When you poll things like that, they have bipartisan support. But Republicans seem to attack them over and over again. Like, put your political strategist hat on for a second. Where is the logic in this?
Yeah, I mean, I have said, way too many times to count, even since I got elected, because I beat a Republican in a Republican district. I don't want to tell them how to win, but here's how to win, which is like, come back to where most people are. I live in Oakland County, Michigan. This is the home of Mitt Romney. This is sort of the home of moderate, small government, pro-business, but we're going to stay out of your personal life Republicans.
Herbert Walker Bush Republicans.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the party, I talked to so many people when I ran for the first time who would like whisper to me. They're like, I'm a Republican, but I'm going to vote for you. And I would have to say, like, don't worry, I'm not going to tell anybody. But that's just more and more and more where we've seen, there was a takeover of the state Republican Party by a full Trump flank of people. Christina Caramo became the party chair. She was a woman who ran for Secretary of State completely on conspiracy theories. She said that Beyonce is Satan, that yoga is Satan, that Satanism is sexually transmitted. And then she filed a lawsuit to have all of the absentee ballots in Detroit thrown out. Like, you're running for Secretary of State and you want to disenfranchise the largest majority Black city in our state. Like, okay. She lost by 14 points. She never conceded her election. And she became the party chair. They went bankrupt effectively. They couldn't raise any money. But it's been fascinating to see, you would think that moments like that would kind of like jolt it back to reality. But there's just this identity crisis. And even with kind of more traditional, sane Republicans coming back into the fold, Mike Rogers is one of them. He's running for U.S. Senate here. He went all in on Trump. He endorsed Trump. And I feel like there's just this fear that if you don't fall in line, Peter Meyer became a congressman on the west side of the state in Michigan. And he voted to impeach Donald Trump, and he immediately lost his next election. I think it's this real struggle of there is no place in the party right now for moderate, sane Republicans. And I think it's going to take a few more cycles. Like, eventually you run out of money and you're not winning and you have to come back to normal. But I don't think we're there yet, especially not as long as Trump is, the head of the party.
What do you think Democrats do between now and the election day to keep the momentum going? Because obviously things are great and we're, I don't like calling it a honeymoon period because I think that like delegitimizes it. But, it's the newness of it all. We haven't really gotten to the post-debate kind of, real nastiness of the election.
Right. I think that if we learn anything in Michigan, I think all of us have a little bit of PTSD from 2016. I talked to so many people, especially women, who said, I just can't bring myself to vote for Hillary Clinton. But, my vote's not important. Right. And I think like the next day you felt just how many people regretted that decision. And if we know anything, we ran last cycle in 2022, like we were all down 15, 20 points. Gretchen Whitmer won re-election by, I think 12 points. Dana Nessel, our attorney general, won by 9. I think Jocelyn Benson, our secretary of state, won by 14. It wasn't close. But we have learned you never stop running. Like I love the Olympics. You never want to be that sprinter who's celebrating before the line. You just don't. Like,
you'll never turn your head and saw the person passing.
Sha'Carri Richardson is an entire other person. Like, she can look back at you and keep running and win. But anybody else, like, don't put your hands up before we're there. So I think that we know that. We have organizing happening in all 83 counties. Something that is a passion of mine is making sure that people recognize the importance of the entire ballot. We saw this happen during Obama's presidency, where I think we were all so excited to be winning at the top. And we weren't paying attention down ballot. So Democrats lost more than 1,000 seats in state legislatures around the country, giving Republicans control of 2/3 of state legislatures, which led to rampant gerrymandering and stripping voting rights and reproductive rights and environmental protection, all of these things that we're just now catching up on. So that is, I think, in a place like Michigan, what we're doing is there's so much excitement at the top. Let's not run away from it. We should be excited and happy and joyful, and let's leverage that in every single race down the ballot, because people will keep showing up if it's fun. There's only so much guilt that you can use to get people to show up. But if it's fun, I think people can keep doing it every day from now until November, and hopefully beyond that, because it's not over, on election day.
That's right. It's not over on election day. It's not going to be over the day after election day. So I wonder, when you think about 2016 and the difference between now and then, do you think Roe versus Wade and kind of the overturning of that is the big difference in terms of white women support? I know you were on that White Women for Harris call.
Oh, yeah.
What's that big igniter this time around?
I think it's a couple of things. I think that logically and sort of esoterically, white women have a deep amount of respect for Hillary Clinton as smart and capable, but there was also this impression that, she's a Clinton. So she's as institutional as you're going to get. And I don't think Vice President Harris, has that, right? Like, she came up from the state legislature to running for attorney general. She's, running ads right now about working at McDonald's through college. It's much more relatable. And that's not, a negative knock on Secretary Clinton. It's just the reality of it. So I think the combination of that plus Roe and the Dobbs decision, that was an earthquake here in Michigan. Yeah. And I would get calls from people who would just couldn't wrap their head around, what do you mean a right of ours that we've had for 50 years has been taken away? We were also on the forefront of fighting that. So, we kind of played chicken with the Supreme Court and said, okay, if you're going to make this a states' rights issue, we're ready. So Governor Whitmer filed a lawsuit in the state of Michigan to keep abortion legal. We had a 1931 abortion ban that was a trigger law that would have gone into effect. So we had an injunction that kept procedures legal as we worked out what we were going to do next, which was the combination of making the case that you have to elect a pro-choice majority in the legislature because we are the ones who are going to pass state laws. And we had a ballot initiative, Prop 3, to codify Roe in our state constitution. And that collected more signatures than any other issue on the ballot in state history. And our state law requires you get a certain number of signatures in every county. So, when people say, oh, this is just like an urban or suburban issue. No, this is rural, it's urban, it's suburban, it's middle of the state. Everybody that I talked to post Dobbs had a story about knowing somebody or themselves, about how hard it is to get pregnant and stay pregnant, a pregnancy that went wrong, an ectopic pregnancy, a miscarriage that, didn't pass. And we were finally talking about it in an honest way that we should have been talking about it the entire time. But I feel like Republicans could always run with scare tactics because Roe was always there as a protection. And once it was gone, people really realized oh, this is so much bigger than scare messaging.
Yeah. And it honestly, it's kind of weird that Republicans have made it such a focus, because when you think about the power of women and women's voting bloc, 1 in 3 women live in a state where there's an abortion ban. 1 in 4 women in the country at some point in their life are going to have an abortion. Banning this, returning this to the states has really it's put abortion on almost every major ballot in the country. What is it about this that Republicans seem to want to keep relitigating, but also failing to acknowledge is costing them elections?
Yeah, the history of this issue is it used to be a non-issue. Decades ago, you polled Republicans and Democrats, and most said, I think, what most voters have been voting on as all of these ballot initiatives that have come up, which is, people think abortion should be legal in most cases. But I think when you start to get into a place where, because of gerrymandering and the way that power has worked over the last few decades, what has happened here in Michigan and I think around the country is more and more fringe Republican nominees were coming out of primaries that we're just wildly out of touch with the majority of people. And, it's given us an opportunity, and the vice president is doing this. This is about freedom. Abortion, I think, is a scary word for a lot of people, but it's really about every woman, and frankly, every family has the right to decide if and when they get pregnant. Full stop. That's one of the most important decisions you're ever going to make. It will fundamentally change your life in every regard. And if it does go wrong, you want to know that you have access to care. And it has been really wild. I mean, almost depressing, because we've had a lot of legislation that we've passed since Prop 3 went into effect. We've been repealing a lot of arbitrary restrictions to care. And hearing some of my Republican colleagues speak out against the legislation that we're passing, they talk about it like it's the downfall of humanity. And they echo a lot of the language that Trump says about post-birth abortion, which is not a thing. Like, that's infanticide. That's killing a baby. It does not happen. They always focus on the most narrow cases and make it really gory. Like, this is something that is so disgusting to me, is talking about like the physical procedure of a later abortion. So we
as if people have them just to have them, not because
just
of
willy-nilly, like
horrific medical reason.
No woman is gonna stay pregnant. I'm the mother of a toddler right now. Like, nobody is voluntarily staying pregnant for 9 months and then going, you know what? I don't think so. Like, no, it doesn't happen. We had in Michigan in the last year that data has been collected, out of, a state of 10 million people, there were 2 abortions that took place after 28 weeks. And they were both because of health complications. Like, so all of this focus on, frankly, when you're in that position, and I had constituents who went through this, when you get that diagnosis so late in a pregnancy, that's a pregnancy you wanted. You have been planning for it. You're thrilled and over the moon. And it's just the worst news you could possibly imagine. So to legislate making that worse or illegal to get care is just so callous and heartless. But I think, it's the dog that caught the car. You message for years and years and years and years, and suddenly you actually have to respond in real time. And I don't think they know what to do now.
What does a post-Trump world look like, whether it's this cycle or the next? I have friends that are Republicans who are common sense Republicans. Like, they do still exist, but the Trump world has kind of drowned them out. How do we get back to at least a sense of we can disagree on policy, but it doesn't feel like everything is heading towards a civil war?
I mean, that has to be the hope, right? Like, I take crap from, fellow Democrats when I say that. Like, we need 2 functional parties, and we need sane Republicans, and we need sane Democrats, and we have to work together, because that's the reality of our state and our country. It's been interesting to watch, of all of kind of the Trump acolytes that have been running for office in a state like Michigan and, around the country. I remember everybody thought, oh, Carrie Lake is going to be unbeatable. Okay, well, she lost. For everybody who models themselves after Trump, I don't think anybody can do what Trump does. There is a way that he captures attention and loyalty and passion that I don't think there's anybody who can replicate. So without him at the top of the ticket, if and when he loses this November, and I hope he just retires and plays golf or whatever it is he wants.
He said he's going to Venezuela. That's what he told Elon. If he loses, he's going to Venezuela. Adios.
Sure. I'm just going to say he promised us in the first election that if Democrats won, we would have a taco truck on every corner, and I would like a taco truck. I'm waiting for my taco truck. So we'll see if he does that, but I just, again, I think that it's going to be, I don't know that anybody has quite the secret sauce that he has. And eventually you lose a few more cycles and you run out of money and you have to reset. Like, you can't have a functional party that does nothing but lose. And there's a counter to, the Democratic Party, where I think we've seen some pretty high profile losses of more progressive Democrats in favor of more moderate Democrats, which is not what's happening on the Republican side right now. So I think the incentive structure on the Republican side is, Trump or nothing. And on our side, it seems to be, no, we need to win. You have to adjust if that's your goal.
What does it mean to see Vice President Harris up there, and the potential for her to not just be the first woman, but the first woman of color, and to kind of be potentially the one that can finally send Trumpism, at least, to the history books?
I don't even think we can wrap our heads around what it actually means yet until it's in the rearview mirror. But it is, my district now includes probably about a fifth of Detroit. So I had an event in the community last week or a couple of weeks ago, at a nonprofit that works with teenage girls around building up confidence and body confidence and, period health and all kinds of stuff. But spent the afternoon with them, and to have one of these girls ask me, she's like, how do you feel about the fact that we're going to have the first woman president? There was no doubt. She looked at what is happening and just said, oh, this is going to happen. And just the way she asked that question to me feels so different than 2016 did, where every question was, is America ready for a woman president? A lot has happened since 2016. Again, I point to Michigan. Michigan is now a state run largely by women. I think we're ready. And I think it's just such a great opportunity. I think that people rise to the moment. And in 2020, I think Joe Biden was exactly who we needed to defeat Donald Trump. We did that. Now it's how do we move into what's next? And I think she's the right person for this moment. And watching her put this campaign together overnight, and build up the energy and enthusiasm that she has been nothing short of inspiring to watch and be a small part of.
Last question. Part of your ascent into politics can be also tied to the rise to Trump. What have you learned, and what do you think the country can learn from this traumatic experience of Trumpism? What's the takeaway?
Yeah, so I decided to run for office when the day after the 2016 election, there was a video that went viral long before mine did, of middle school students chanting "Build that wall" at another middle schooler, a Latina student. And that video was from Royal Oak Middle School, which is where we live. And it was my polling place. So, having stood in that gym a couple days, the day before, to vote for what I thought was going to be the first woman president, and then to see the video is really eerie. I mean, it's terrifying to watch because it's an entire lunchroom of kids banging on the tables and just screaming this at a girl who's sobbing. And I think CNN came in and did an interview with her and her family. They ended up moving out of the district. It was so traumatizing. But she said, these are my friends. And to have this disconnect where people who theoretically care about you think that this is okay. There was something about that, it broke me, and I Googled how to run for office and I tried to figure it out. And then I've been on the receiving end of a lot of that. I got attacked in 2022 by a colleague who accused me of, by name, of wanting to groom and sexualize kindergartners and wanting 8-year-olds to believe they were responsible for slavery. And I gave a speech. Very candidly, I thought it was the last speech I would ever give. I was so burned out that I was like, I'm not running for re-election. I tried. I'm tired of being punched in the face. And in the speech, I identified myself as a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom, intentionally, who knows that hate will only win when people like me let it happen. And I posted it, and within 24 hours, 12 million people saw it. And I got a phone call from the president, and all of a sudden I was on every news network in the entire country and on The View. I heard my own voice, which was very strange. But I think the response to that, and the response that we're seeing, especially the way that Harris's campaign is treating Trump's bullying, is to make fun of it. And I think that's how you take its power away. I didn't, in my speech, I didn't say, oh, Republicans are doing this and Democrats are doing this. I talked about myself. I talked about how I was raised. I talked about my mom and just said, this is on us, fellow white ladies, which is probably why I joined the white women call. We did this. And it's not okay. Bullying kids so that you feel better about yourself, I'm sorry, is trash behavior. And I think that's the attitude. You unleash like Gen Z on Donald Trump and they just sort of make fun of his bullying. It takes all the power away from it. So I hope that the election goes the way that we want it to go. And then that's what we see is like bullying your way into power is not, it's just not necessary. We don't have to do it. Like making people feel small is just, it's un-American. And I hope we get back to like, we're not perfect. We have a long way to go. But this idea that this should be a place where everybody has opportunity and everybody has an equal shot is what we should aspire to be. And it's a big enough country for all of us, unlike what Donald Trump seems to believe.
We can build people up, not tear them down.
Exactly.
Michigan State Senator Mallory McMorrow, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining the show.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for being with me today. Share this episode with others, like and review it, and please keep learning all you can so that you can make an informed voting decision this year. Come back next week for more Truth in Politics. I'm Michael Starr Hopkins, and this is It Matters.